sweet and to the point. Then we go into development strategies and how our development strategies have changed over the last period of time. Then look at site assessment, although my assumption is, having spoken to a number of you, you probably know far more than a guy who adds up numbers for a living, so I'll keep that short and sweet. And then talk about EPC choice. And I suppose there are two choices there, is whether you go for an EPC at all, and then if you decide to go for an EPC, how you look for one that's appropriate for your needs. Okay, in terms of background, we were set up in November 2010, pretty much like most of the individuals in here, I would imagine. Were we sort of slightly different in terms of how we did it? While most people were running around Cornwall knocking on farmers' doors, we were running around the centre of London knocking on financial institutions' doors. And the reason for that, very like Bob, is that, you know, ultimately, cash is king. Ultimately, if you secure the finance, then everything else will come. And I think, you know, whether it was luck or whether it was design, luck, but I'll take the credit for design, whenever the feed-in tariff was announced to have that serious cut in March 2011, then we were in the enviable position, while equity exited stage left and debt exited stage right, other way around, we were in the enviable position of having a very large checkbook, and therefore I was glad to say that we managed to do 14 deals between March and 1st of August, build, connect. So of the 79 megawatts of large scale that were, you know, built on the 1st of August, we had 35 megawatts of them. So I'll bring you up to speed on sort of what we've been doing so far. Hopefully you'll not know about this, because we've tried until this point to keep it fairly quiet. As I said, 35 megawatts in July 2011. We've now broken 300 megawatts. The breakdown of that I'll talk to you about in a minute, but we're a UK-based company, and our absolute core focus is on UK development. We've tied ourselves in with one particular company of funders called Octopus Investments, and I have to say, much like Paul, hopefully is going to experience, we've experienced absolutely outstanding support from them. And I'll talk later about the importance of not only going and seeking funding, but also making sure that the funding that you get is appropriate for the investments that you're making. Because sometimes it's very easy to go and raise money, but unless you actually are fully aware of the attributes of the actual end investment, then there's going to be a falling out at some point. We worked long and hard to make sure that the investor fitted the investment, and that's something that I would strongly suggest you do too. So what have we done? We currently have 70, this is all connected by the way, we have a pipeline that, like everyone else, is enormous, but as if you drive for show and you punt for dough. We have 70 large-scale sites in the UK, 281 megawatts, which I have to say, by Ray's equation, Ray's 600 megawatts this morning means that we're nearly 50% of the whole UK market. I have to say, I think it's slightly more than 600 megawatts, but we're happy to take 50% of the UK market, thanks Ray. They range from 1 megawatt to 12 megawatts. We've just completed our largest, which is 12.3, but we currently have some 20s, some 18s, some 15s, etc. So we're not sort of, like everyone else, they've up to 5 megawatts because of the feed-in tariff focus, as obviously will take some time to sort of work its way out. And then obviously with rock, the average size will clearly grow. I think we're probably at about 8 megawatts as an average size for our portfolio at the moment. We also have 97 schools. Total pain in the arse. If anyone wants to buy 97 schools, fantastic. Not the entire schools, clearly, although the government might well want to sell them. We also have 31 farm installations of 50 kilowatts each. Again, whenever the feed-in tariff dropped after the 1st of August, you know, if you didn't have any that were using the grandfathering rules, there was a gap in time until such times as the prices fall, balance of system and panels fell sufficiently that large scale became viable. And clearly, 97 schools and 31 50 kilowatt systems is what we were doing in that time. And we also, because we've sort of said, well, hang on a second here, we can do it in the UK, we're the largest in the UK, and you know, can we basically, from a UK base, look to go international? So last year we bought 94 million euros worth of sites in France, and I hear you say 94 million, and it's 17.5 megawatts, which is a lot for 94 million, or not very much for 94 million euros, but the majority of those are on a 60 cent or to developments, we've deployed Boyle Business for You over 500 million, all equity. We did our first loan bank financing, which was in the paper. You guys might have realised it, but we did 65% RBS, 35% NIBC, 53.5 million pounds of financing, project finance 2 months ago for our first 6 projects. So we're now starting to, bring in project finance, release our equity, and start using that money again. That's not to say that we're sitting back on our laurels. We've got some very aggressive targets. Okay, moving on to the development strategy. My assumption is a number of you have been involved in the whole sort of development piece. I want to talk about just very quickly the different elements that are involved in development, and then talk about what way we, and I'm not saying that we're in any way right, it's just the way that this suited us, and the aspirations and the appetite that we had, it's sort of suited us to go a particular way. But in terms of development, the inputs are funding, which I sort of touched on, funding, as I said. Then you've got the site selection, and a lot of you are very familiar, being from other markets, on site selection. What's a good site, what's a bad site? And simply looking at the sunlight is definitely not the only way to look at a site. Then on design, you can very much increase and positively impact the performance of the site if you actually design it properly. I'm told, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to be working. Planning. You've got to bring the planners with you. I mean, it's interesting. Cornwall we saw as a massively fresh and positive council, but even they, and that's where we did an awful lot of our sites, but even they are starting to mellow in their view. So it's really, really important that you're cognizant of planning whenever you're making any plans about where you're going to go and how big you're going to go. Obviously, the bigger you go, the more challenging that's likely to be. So, maybe you don't all rush for 30 megawatts. Well done to Jonathan for getting it. Grid. We all know about grid. It is ultimately the main limiting factor. Legal. Minefield. We're going to hear all about that. Not about the minefield, clearly. Technical. And then finally, you've got the property due diligence. And I'm going to tell you what way we've gone about it. We made the decision early on, and this is not a cheap decision, but it was a decision that was appropriate for us given our aspirations to develop, basically do hundreds of millions rather than tens of millions. And we made the decision to do everything in-house. So we have 140 in-house, not building type people, I'm talking about development type people. So in-house we have our development managers that fall into 2 distinct groups. We have in-house development and we have shovel ready. In 2011, and for most of the year ending now, our main focus as a company was shovel ready sites. So buying sites off developers that had got planning and grid, ready to go on site. We went in, built the stuff to our specification, etc. And of the 54 sites that we built in the last 12 months, 34 of which we connected in the first 3 months of this year, which is what everyone seems to be talking about for some reason. We did do 54 in the year. Of those, all bar 17 of them were bought shovel ready. But what we also did, which is a massive advantage to us as a business, is we started 9 months ago our own in-house development functionality. So 17 of the 54 sites that we did, from soup to nuts, as the Americans would say, we developed ourselves. And that's something we're really, really proud of, because that was not that's not something we'd done before. So 35% of what we did last year, in the year just ending, was developed ourselves and 65 external. This year, which starts on the 1st of May, we want to swap that. So we want to do 65% in-house and 35% external. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with developers continuing, and I'd be very happy if you did continue to introduce business to us. But from our perspective, it represents something that we believe we can do in-house. We've now proved we can do in-house, and certainly it does significantly reduce the amount of cost that obviously we have within a project. In terms of ours alone, we basically monitor every single one of our staff in 15-minute chunks, so we know exactly what everyone's doing and what they're working on. And to take legal as an example, for an externally built site, one that we've inherited with someone else's lease and someone else's EPC, etc., the average that we the average time spent by our in-house legal, not external, was 450 hours. But our in-house developed site, the average legal was 140 hours. So that's not the reason why we do our in-house development, it's another example of why the more you can control in-house, the more productive you can clearly be. We also have, development managers, I think we have 20 or something like that. Planners, we've got 9 in-house. We have 11 in-house lawyers from everything from, property, from all of the various different, I won't sort of attempt to list all the different types of lawyers, but there's a full range of lawyers in there. And again, that not only saves us time, but it also means that we give less to external lawyers, which if any of you have dealt with them in the past, you will know that can be a very painful process and a very expensive process. We also have in-house engineers. While we don't design the things ourselves because we want EPCs to step up to the plate and take responsibility for the performance, we oversee absolutely everything. So we've got in-house engineers, electrical, mechanical, structural, so everything that is done gets signed off internally. We also have in-house financing. We've just, as I said, financed our first 53 million. We have about 212 million going through the project finance process at the moment. You'll probably see an announcement in the next month or so with the closing of probably the first 50 of that 200 odd million. And again, we're pretty open book. We're not trying to sort of keep anything from anyone. If you want to have a conversation about what way we go about that, then by all means we'll have that chat. Project managers, we have 18 project managers. Each of our project managers has sort of, if it's a large site, maybe 1, and failing that, sort of 2 sites to deal with at any time. They're expected to manage every single part of the process and make sure that we keep the EPCs honest. Not that they necessarily need to be kept honest, but by the same token, it's always good to know exactly where you are. Asset management. One of the things that we've had to build more recently, clearly asset management isn't a particularly important element of your business if you don't have any assets to manage, but something that we've focused on a lot in the last sort of 6 to 12 months is gaining control of our assets. We're absolutely wedded to the fact that you can manage the performance of assets to seriously and significantly increase the level of EBITDA that you can drive from an individual project. We estimate that 1% increase in your PR will increase your EBITDA from that project by 8%. And if you ignore that, then you're an idiot. So from our perspective, what we've done, similar to Angus, I have to say, is we've spent an awful lot of time working or sort of co-developing, along with Sense One here, our own in-house system. Because our attitude is that the more we can actually control every single and know about every single element that's going on within our parks, the better we can actually drive the efficiencies and make sure that we maximise the potential from our parks. So control our assets, integrated monitoring we have in every single moving part or not moving part, given its moving, and accurate performance indicators. There's been some talk about the Bentley site. One of the things, because this looks sexy, one of the things that we do is we bespoke and give to the actual owners of the site, not owners of the site, but owners of Bentley themselves, the information so that they can actually access it. So we have obviously Bentley branded here. So Bentley are able to, on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or a 15-minute basis if they want, look at exactly what it is that the system is producing. They've also asked for this information to be fed through to their own energy management system, so they can actually integrate this and obviously be able to monitor on a daily or monthly or weekly basis exactly what we are supplying to them, and therefore, what the shortfall is. The Bentley site's an interesting one. We will produce 40%. They take all of the electricity, but we will basically supply 40% of the entire Crew Bentley factory's electricity requirements, which for us is a great coup. It's really nice counterparty, but for them it's just such a no-brainer. And to the question earlier, I just don't see why smaller companies, maybe not as bankable as Bentley, should be able to benefit from exactly that sort of thing, but on a slightly smaller scale. Obviously, we've got many different ways to cut the information, but obviously that's up to Bentley, and we can supply them whatever level of information they require. So, in terms of, if I can be so bold as to say that light source does work, but I think you certainly have a significant market share. It's a fair indication that the model does work. And I would say that the first fundamental thing that we did right, and I would suggest that Bob's done exactly that, is go and get the funding first. It's so much, we already had the money when doing a deal. So we don't have to run off and see whether the bank's advisors think it's a good idea or a bad idea. The checkbook was sat in our office. So deploy over 500 million, having to rely on somebody else is absolutely impossible in 2 short years. The second thing is that make sure that the funding matches the investment. Every single penny that we raise is from retail. So it's from Mr. and Mrs. Smith, sat on every single high street in the land. Our average investor invests £18,000 and is 58 years of age. So this is not some fat cat sat with a £5 million checkbook demanding a 12 or 15% return because they're on drugs if they think they're getting that in the solar. This is someone who wants a predictable, very predictable, counterparty rich revenue stream that is absolutely sure to give them their money back whenever they want. And that's what solar is. It is a predictable, government-backed, pretty good counterparty, index-linked, long-dated income stream. So that's where you should look to raise your money. Don't try and do something with VCs. It's just not going to work. It's going to end up hurting at some point, probably in your pocket. And in-house. In-house is not right for everyone. You know, we're spending a very significant amount of money to employ 140 people. It's only right for you if your business model is to reach a certain critical mass, and I'm not saying that's right for everyone, but it certainly works for us. But the more that you can do it, the more you can control, the better. That's led to us having clearly experience with sort of 70 deals, 71 because we closed one today, deals in large scale in the UK. Speed, standard documentation, standard way of working, everybody knows what they're doing, how the process works. We're not inventing anything because we've done it so many times before, which speeds up the process. And flexibility for exactly the same reasons. In terms of picking the right site, you guys know as well as I do. In fact, you guys know better than I do because you're all engineers and I add up numbers. But the right site is not just about how sunny it is. You've got to take in factors like, you know, the layout, rectangle, absolutely perfect, with a substation in the corner, and you know, basically an off-taker 2 miles down the road would be perfect. They don't all work like that, but obviously you've got to make sure that you know and you assess every element of the site before you rock on and start paying 40 or 50,000 pounds for planning permission. But by the same token, please bear in mind the planners and bear in mind their hardening attitude to this stuff. There's enough land in the UK without us trying to tweak the nose of the planners. Moving on to the right EPCs. I know that there's some individuals in this room who think that we're mad continuing with using third-party EPC contractors, especially given all that I said about what we do in-house. But from our perspective, that's a level of expertise and an area that we are not interested in doing. We never say never, but currently we are not. So what we tend to do is we forge close working relationships with a key number of large players. Solar Century, for example, we've done £100 million worth of business with Solar Century. So we don't tend to do a deal with any EPC contractor. We tend to do multiple deals with EPC contractors. Grupotech is a great case in point. Grupotech connected 12 sites in the first quarter of this year. The last one started on site in late January. That's an absolutely fantastic result for them, but ultimately it's the closeness of the working relationship. Every one of those people has got a desk in our office. They're familiar with us, we socialise with them, and there's a great working relationship. And we share with them what way our model works. So sometimes they're feeling paid when we are, and sometimes they're being well rewarded when we are. So I think it's really important that you pick the right EPCs. Development strategy, to sum up, you need the right money. Don't kid yourselves, get the right money. You need the right site and the right business partners, and you need to control the process. Whether that's from start to finish, as we choose to do, or whether it's using third parties because of the fact you've got a small in-house team, that's entirely your own decision. But you have to control, and you've got to know exactly what's going on. Some photographs. The interesting one, I suppose, is the two on the left there, the big one that looks like and here, that's Bentley. There are, I think, 23,000 panels on the roof of Bentley cars. If you ever get a chance to go and see it, it